Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Other People's Money by Cynthia Hamilton. And this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Madeline was going over the final details for an upcoming 3-day event with her assistant when Mike rapped on her door jamb. Are you taking off? She asked. Not yet. By his short reply and the tense look on his face, Madeline sensed something was up. Even Lauren picked up on his subdued manner when she glanced at him over her shoulder. So I think everything's falling into place, she said, gathering up her notes while she waited for Madeline to give her blessing. You haven't missed a thing. Great job, as Madeline smiled as she pushed away from her desk and stood up. Her eyes shifted to Mike as Lauren slipped past him, trying to read his mood. Slovich is in my office, he informed her once Lauren disappeared. Mike caught the way his wife tensed when he mentioned their ally at the SBPD. In all the years they'd known Detective John Slovich, most of their interactions with him were initiated by one of them, usually when they needed information only law enforcement had access to. He has some news he needs to share with you. Well, let's see what he's got to say, Madeline said casually. She crossed in front of her husband without looking at him and headed toward his office. The detective was scrolling through his messages on his phone when they entered. Hi, John, what's going on? Madeline asked. John stashed his phone in his shirt pocket and forced a tight smile that did nothing to reassure her. There was always a possibility he had a problem he needed their help with, as he had on occasion, but more often than not, his visits were due to bulletins regarding her fugitive ex-husband, updates that always unsettled her, regardless of how determined she was to believe Stephen Ridley wasn't a threat to her anymore. She motioned for John to have a seat. Not wanting to drag this out, he remained where he stood and got to the point of his visit. Ridley has surfaced again, this time in Switzerland. Before Madeline could react to the unwelcome news, Mike asked, When you say surfaced, what do you mean exactly? He's currently in Swiss custody. He was apprehended after he was spotted on the hotel surveillance footage. It was a fluke, really. He just happened to be passing the entrance as a diplomat's convoy pulled into the motor court. Every frame was scrutinized after the fact. After the fact, Madeline echoed. There was an attempt on the Israeli ambassador's life. Fortunately, he was not hit, but everyone who passed by the hotel prior to the shooting was thoroughly scrutinized. And bingo, Pop Ridley with a different identity, of course. He looks a little worse for wear since the last time I saw his mug, but it's definitely him. Madeline crossed her arms tightly, her expression wary. She could never decide if no news was good news when it came to her conniving and unscrupulous ex. Updates on his whereabouts were always unsettling, but not knowing where he was or what he was up to wasn't any better. Was he involved in the assassination attempt? Mike asked. No, it turned out to be some fringe political group behind the plot. No association to Ridley at all. Well, that's good news about Stephen, I guess, Madeline said, her voice devoid of emotion. Both Mike and John could tell she wasn't willing to invest any hope in Stephen Ridley being brought to justice and incarcerated again. He had slipped that snare before. Last time he landed on his feet in a position of power he created for himself from a prison cell. It was the insult to the injury he had inflicted on her and many others. She gave up on justice years ago. All she really cared about now was safety. Closure would only come when one of them was dead. Well, what will happen now? Mike asked. Is he being extradited back to California? Not yet, I'm afraid. Turns out we are not the only country anxious to lay our hands on him. John let them digest this for a moment. But he's locked up, Madeline said, as if trying to convince herself. According to the intel from the State Department, which is vying for extradition back to the U.S. so he can stand trial for his most recent offenses, in addition to breaking his parole, if they succeed in getting him returned to the U.S., he'll face charges for his last attempt on your life. Thanks, John. We appreciate you giving us the news in person. Knowing Stephen isn't still at large is some comfort. It's just hard for me to trust he'll stay locked up, given his history and that silver tongue of his. I know. I wish I could bring you his head on a platter, but I figured it would be a relief to know he's not still in the wind. Slovich's phone buzzed in his pocket. Well, duty calls. Thanks again, John, Madeline said. The detective waved on his way out, already involved in a conversation on his phone. So, Mike said, taking a reading on his wife's state of mind. He knew being reminded of Stephen Ridley's existence was never easy, but at least this time the news was good. I should get going, Madeline said, purposefully pushing Stephen out of her mind so she could get her day back on track. Oh, right, I forgot you're having lunch with Jane, Mike said, checking the time on his phone. And I need to relieve Samir so he could take his break. Still no progress on the Amore case? No, Mike admitted. I think whoever's walked off with the merchandise got wise to our surveillance, but we'll keep at it until we find what's going on. Whoever's behind the thefts is pretty damn slick. You'll figure it out, Madeline said confidently, giving him an encouraging smile before she headed back to her office to get her things. Go out or stay in tonight? Mike asked as he fell in step behind her. Surprise me, Madeline said as she brushed past him, leaving him with a silly grin on her face, which faded quickly once she was out of sight. He knew she was a lot more concerned about her ex-husband's status than she was willing to admit. The name Stephen Ridley was like an evil incantation that conjured up nothing but trouble. No good ever came from updates on his whereabouts. They only brought him to the forefront of their minds along with the potential danger he posed for Madeline. Maybe this time his incarceration would stick. But Mike sure wasn't going to put any money on it.